So we're on the section 8.2 of your biology book, and we're going to be talking about nerves and how they work, nerve cells. So it starts off talking about the medium nerves in your muscles of your forearm and how from the sensory receptors in your skin of your hand travel along the medium nerve to your spinal cord and then to your brain. And then from the brain, it's translated into to movement. And so to want a movement, to give a message of movement. And from that brain and the spinal cord, it travels to the nerve fibers and to the motor neurons, into the motor areas. So a picture kind of this would be right here. So, so we're going to talk about, like other nerves, the medium nerves consist of nerve fibers surrounded by connective tissue. And then among the glial cells are protected by the myelin sheaths, and each axon relays the sensory or a motor, but never both. You're either a sensory or you're motor, but you're not both in this situation, okay? Nerve cells are called neurons, of course, and most cells with nerve tissue are glial cells, have glial cells, but basically nerve cells are responsible for the process of the nerve impulse conduction, and neurons rarely reproduce. That means that when you have a neuron and the neuron dies, then it's dead and it's not replaced as other cells replace themselves. Nerve cells do not replace themselves. So if you are killing nerves with alcohol or drugs, they will not replace. So that's something to know there. So let's look at this huge, the structure of this nerve, which we're talking about. And they kind of explain it up here, but it's kind of hard to understand. So it's way better to look at the picture. So here we have the blood and the capillaries, the lymph vessels, connective tissue, but we have the nerves in here. So we have the structure of the nerves, the bundle of nerve fibers, and you can see how the axon comes out here like this. The axon is in the middle here. As it comes, it's surrounded by this blue part. And the blue part is the myelin sheath right here, this blue part. And here's the nucleus of the cell right there. So here's these cells here with the nucleus of the cell and the axon right there in the middle. And the Schwann cell and the nerve consists of all these the bundles of axons. And so here we go with this nerve. And so what happens here? You have, if you're looking at this, towards this nerve here, it goes. This is the nerve, the median nerve. So this picture is coming up here. And so this picture is the cell body of a neuron located in the spinal cord. So it's a little different, but you have the dendrites coming out here, and you have that cell body of a neuron located in the spinal cord. And so right here we have this, basically axons end in the synapse of the muscles to move your muscles, move your body. And see how this happens here. From here, it goes through here, and the synapse end in the synapses in the muscles. So it ends there. It starts with basically with the nerve structure, sensory structure going to your brain. Then it comes actually from your brain and ends in a synapse. So that's kind of as going through these, and the Schwann cells, of course. It shows a picture of a Schwann cell there, right here. And what are Schwann cells? They're axons that are extending from the nerve cells to the peripheral nerves and are surrounded by these glial cells right here, Schwann cells and the glial cells, and produce layers of myelin sheaths. There we have the myelin sheaths, and they act for insulation. So the myelin axons transmit nerve impulses much faster than axons without covering. So when you have a lot of covering, the nerve impulses are going to go a lot faster with the slickness of those myelin sheaths. Okay, now let's talk about some of the nerve problems with the nervous system, some diseases. Well, a defective impulse transmission, when this is not working real well, we have a disease called MS. Have you ever heard of MS? or multiple sclerosis. And it's a disease of the brain and spinal cord, and it usually is in adults, where the body's immune system attacks the glial cells. The glial cells and the myelin sheaths here. So, and the glial cells provide the myelin sheaths, so the myelin sheaths are not there. So this deteriorates, and the myelin sheaths are actually replaced by scar tissue around here. So you're going to have a problem transmitting impulses through it with just when the myelin sheaths are not there. It's going to cause everything to go a lot slower, right, with MS. And so a lot of the sheaths, especially related to vision, because vision is one of the first sensations, and then the movement of the limbs. If you have MS, you have a hard time moving your limbs, and losing those myelin makes it vulnerable to different short circuits. So symptoms are like blurred vision, double vision, disturbances in sensations, muscle weakness, come and go through it, and they recur at intervals. So a lot of MS, sometimes they do well for a while, then maybe they have a problem like in an interval of a month, you get really sick, or years. But later on, they can lead to permanent damage or paralysis, and people end up in wheelchairs when they have MS, and usually die earlier with MS. One of my mom's good friends had that, and I saw her. It's pretty sad. So another is, MS, we're talking about the synaptic transmission here. So transmitting a nerve impulse. Let's look at this. So how does a nerve impulse really work? This is pretty neat to watch this, so a synapse. That's all of a sudden, where the synapse is like all of a sudden the nerve impulse is activated, right? To do something. So a synapse is an enclosed junction between two neurons, or between a neuron and another cell. A neuromuscular junction is between the neuron and the muscle fiber, right? And the neurotransmitter to be released at this point is a chemical. So we have a chemical that's released. The sensors detect it, and they generate electrical signals that trigger the neuron to fire. The second neuron relays the impulse to the third neuron, and then to the fourth neuron, to the fifth neuron. And it keeps going. It just starts synapse, like clicking like fireworks. So you have this action potential. You have this neuron that's triggered. You have a brief pause there where the positive charge sweeps through and races down the axon like a firecracker, and then this is propagated by a fast action, a voltage sensation of ion gates that quickly open and close and allow sodium and potassium ions to briefly flow into the cell and out of the cell. And after this potential is passed, the cell membrane goes back to normal with the ion pump, and it goes right back. And this balance can fire again in as little as 1/2000th of a second. Okay, I don't know if you got all that, but it's pretty. This picture kind of shows it. So what happens, you have the axon at rest, and you have all the positive on the outside, and you have all the negative on the inside. So you're talking the ion pumps, and they give inner membrane negative. So here they're going to rest. This is where you have the axon at rest. So number one, the ions flow into the cell, changing the charge from positive to negative. So suddenly you have these positive ones going in the cell right here. See how they're going in the cell? So now you're going to transmit an impulse because you have an electrical impulse going. And so now the ions of the cell restore the inner negative charge. So you see how you got the positive charge. You see how the positive charge is moving? Boom, boom, boom. It's moving up, boom, boom, boom. And now the impulse is transmitted through the axon. So you're transmitting it, boom. So here you go. This is, and then it goes back to rest. The ion pumps put it back to rest. Now you have the positive and the negative charge, and here you have going in the positive charge, and it's transmitting up, going to the next positive charge to the next neuron. Isn't that cool? And it has to do with potassium and sodium. So if your electrolytes are out of whack, you're going to have a big problem with your nerves. So you need to make sure, like that's why when they always, would test your blood and test your electrolytes to see if they're okay, because you really need to have these electrolytes. And calcium too is another, but here we have sodium, picture of the sodium ion pump, sodium and potassium ion pumps here. So let's go on here. Reflex action. Well, before the reflex action, it talked about inhibitors. It talks about some things that can block nerves from transmitting. So if you have a nerve that's going to transmit it, you have something that's going to block it. So let's go on here. Inhibitors right there. So one of the inhibitors is lidocaine. So when you go, I was going to say Novocaine. Novocaine does too, but lidocaine is what they use in anesthesia. So it blocks nerve impulses. So like if they put lidocaine in a certain area, you will not feel anything. You will not feel pain at all because it will block that pain there. So the lidocaine blocks will block those sensory nerves that to make it an anesthetic, right? And then you have this disease called botulism. That was pretty interesting to me because botulism is a toxin and it's a deadly poison. And you can get it from eating like canned food, where the toxin, basically the bacteria in the canned food, and you eat this and this toxin in this canned food. I mean, it's probably canned food that's improperly canned, and this toxin inside, this protein inside, prevents the motor synapse from happening, these bacteria, and it can cause paralysis and death by suffocation, and gradually by suffocation. So it's the most deadly type of food poisoning there is botulism. And it's by this Clostridium botulism. Another thing about this is, about the botulism, is that they do take a little bit of this botulism, and I don't know if you've ever heard of Botox. Probably have. Well, that's what Botox is a little bit of this toxin that they put in women's faces or wherever for cosmetic purposes, right? So it's really a poison, but they use it in very small injections and they also use it to relax the muscles in your face. And I've had to take it because of my twitching eye and certain eye conditions, because if your eye is twitching, it calms down the twitching eye by blocking the nerves where the nerves are making your eyes continue to twitch. So there's some good things about it, but I wouldn't want to take Botox all the time if you had to. It's a poison. And I forgot about this Parkinson's disease. So what is Parkinson's disease? Well, have you heard of people with Parkinson's disease? Well, they usually have problems with their posture and their movement, and they have tremors happening and stiff limbs. They move at they kind of shuffle along with a very slow rate, due to the lack of neuromuscular transmitting. What they don't have or have in low qualities is dopamine. And dopamine is this chemical transmitter that helps transmit to the nerves so that they work normally. And so they're low in this dopamine, and it's usually because areas of the brain, especially in the midbrain, that causes this dopamine to happen. And so Parkinson's, and usually people over 50, but a lot of times, sometimes where brain damage can cause it too, which limits that dopamine to being produced. Parkinson's disease. Okay, now we're going to this reflex. The reflex action. Reflex is the simplest act of the nervous system. So you have what's called a reflex arc, which means it's kind of short circuits. It means say that you have a pain, all of a sudden a pain in your finger. Well, so it can move faster. It bypasses your brain and goes to your spinal cord, and then comes right back so that you can move your reflex to move your arm really quick so you don't continue to get burned or such. That's a reflex. Have you ever seen them test your reflexes on your knee reflexes? And they pound on your knee and your knee jerks. Well, that doesn't even go to your brain. You're not thinking of moving your brain, but your body just reacts by your spinal cord. So here we have this pain receptor going up, number one, going to the sensor for the sensory neurons, of course, of picking up that pain. It's going up to your spinal cord, which is in your cervical area of your neck. And then the interneurons in your spinal cord process that threat, and the motor neurons transmit them, and they come back down to the muscle. See where the muscles is? And the muscle jerks away your hand, right, from danger. So that's a reflex. And reflexes don't even go to your brain. You don't have to think about them. They just happen, right? So what amazing. How amazing is our nervous system? So let's stop there.